tonight.
People are trying to cover up for a terrible loss that the Democrats had under Hillary Clinton. I think it's very, very unfair what's happened to General Flynn.
President Trump saying General Flynn's demise was partially the fault of the press. But is that true? Talking Points will deal with it.
That was a 9/11 scale event. They attacked the core of our very democracy. That was a Pearl Harbor scale event.
A New York Times columnist says Russia committed an act of war toward the USA. Bowling and Rivera on that.
When someone points a gun at a cop, that's something that we take very, very seriously. They were out there doing what we asked them to do, going after bad guys with guns.
Also ahead, a gun-wielding 18-year-old shot dead by police after being released from custody by a judge. A shocking situation. Caution. You are about to enter the no spin zone. The factor begins right now. Hi, I'm Bill O'Reilly. Thanks for watching us tonight. Mass hysteria over General Michael Flynn. That is the subject of this evening's Talking Points memo. As we reported last night, the National Security Advisor has resigned because the Trump administration says it lost confidence in him. The story's a bit complicated, but it boils down to this. Flynn had phone contact with the Russian ambassador in late December while Barack Obama was still president. According to leaks from the intelligence agencies, Flynn discussed Mr. Obama's sanctions against Russia. Then General Flynn denied that to Vice President Mike Pence. The FBI also interviewed General Flynn, and if he lied to them, that would be a crime. However, that's a big if. It is not a crime for Mr. Flynn to informally talk with the Russian ambassador before Donald Trump took office, but it's highly inappropriate if policy was discussed. So at this point, Flynn's out, and it looks like retired Vice Admiral Robert Harwood will take his place. Admiral Harwood is 60 years old, has extensive military experience, served in Afghanistan. Looks like a solid choice, but you never know. By the way, the FBI is still investigating the whole Russian situation, but that's all we know at this point. However, lack of facts doesn't stop the anti-Trump press from whipping up hysteria. There are two things in play. First, the Trump haters are fervently hoping they can link the Trump campaign to the Russian hackers who disrupted the Clinton campaign. That's the ultimate goal for the haters. If they cannot achieve that, they'd like to have General Flynn tell the world that Donald Trump ordered him to call the Russian ambassador. So that's the media game plan. Now, yesterday, the bombast on our cable competition was actually humorous. New York Times columnist Thomas Friedman compared the Russian hacking to war.
We have never taken seriously from the very beginning, Russia hacked our election. That was a 9/11 scale event. They attacked the core of our very democracy. That was a Pearl Harbor scale event.
Now, here's how crazy that statement is. Say President Trump declared war on Russia, as we did after Pearl Harbor. Would Thomas Friedman support that? Of course not. So this is just madness. However, the anti-Trump media loves this kind of stuff. Let me give you another very simple example, and it has to do with speculation.
Do you think Flynn acted alone when he made that phone call to the Russian ambassador in Washington?
I don't think that anything in Washington happens alone.
Now, that man, Congressman Seth Moulton, is a Trump hater. Also, he has no blanking idea whether General Flynn acted alone. He couldn't possibly know. Wolf Blitzer, generally a responsible guy, asked a speculative question based on nothing. There could not have been any credible answer that shed light on the Flynn situation. So why bother with that nutty speculation? The answer is there are millions of Trump haters who will sit there in front of the TV hour after hour after hour and watch this kind of bilge, B-I-L-G-E, bilge. And that's why they do it. Summing up, there's no credible evidence at this point that the Trump campaign cooperated with the Russians in the hacking of the Clinton campaign. None. There is no credible evidence that General Flynn was directed to do anything. Yet the anti-Trump media spends hours talking trash. One footnote, hard news reporters should be looking into all the Russian intrusions, including the Flynn situation. And if those reporters uncover evidence of wrongdoing, it should be presented. But speculation by the media is garbage. And that's the memo. Now for the top story reaction, joining us from Washington, legendary investigative reporter Bob Woodward, an associate editor of the Washington Post. Where am I going wrong here, Mr. Woodward?
Well, there is an anti-Trump press. There's a pro-Trump press. I think the hard news reporters, as you said, should keep digging on this. Here's my reaction. I know General Flynn a little bit, and the idea that he kind of misled about one thing, as you know, Bill, people in the White House always mislead somebody on something. That became a firing offense does not make sense to me. And all my alarm bells went off. Why is he gone for this? And I think the alarm bells went off for lots of reporters. All right,
let me give you the explanation that's coming out of the White House is that Vice President Pence, very powerful guy, talked to Flynn, and Flynn told him, hey, I didn't talk about any of the sanctions. And then the Vice President went on network television and said that hey, General Flynn didn't do it. And now, turns out, because of tapped conversations and, transcripts that nobody's seen, but nobody's denying it anymore, that Flynn did talk about sanctions. So when you, at that level, mislead a vice president and goes out and then, misstates something, that is a firing offense, Bob, and you know it.
Well, not necessarily.
Oh, come
Look,
on.
He apologized. Now you come on. And so I'm telling you, my alarm bells went off. I think lots of people had the same feeling who were in the media, so they're asking the question, what really goes on here?
Dopey speculative questions to Trump haters are quite something else. I mean, look, on one of our competitors, they got 9 people. I don't know where they find all the lounge chairs. And they just line them up. There's 2 token conservatives, 7 Trump haters, and they go down with this is Watergate. If I were you, I'd sue anybody saying this is Watergate. If I were you, Woodward, I'd sue them. Well, okay? And then they have nothing to back it up. It's all crazy speculation, and that's what we're getting into in this country. Nobody knows the facts. Nobody knows anything. It's all speculation.
Okay, there is a lot of speculation and a lot of nonsense, so let's get the facts. So there's going to be a congressional investigation. The FBI is supposedly looking at this. Here's the remedy, if I may really put something that's concrete out there, and that is for the Trump White House to get the counsel in the White House to look at this. The president has authority to release anything, even material that's classified, and put out a report and say, this is what really happened. This is what went on, because the congressional investigation is going to take months. The FBI, God knows how long that's going to take. And you have created the environment of suspicion and anxiety.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we'd all like to know what really happened, and I'm not opposed to that.
Well, why don't they do this?
Well, because there are unintended consequences of every action, as you know. So if you wanted to make an enemy out of General Flynn, which President Trump obviously doesn't want to do, you hang him. All right, and you make an enemy out of him.
Well, he's fired him. He's fired him. That's a pretty serious matter. Come on.
I'm agreeing with you. I'm agreeing with you. It is.
Okay,
but he said nice things about him today, and he doesn't seem to want to alienate him or make him what they call a scapegoat. And then Flynn would have to defend himself. Then Flynn could come back and say, well, so-and-so told me to do this. And it becomes a real mess. I'm not saying they shouldn't. I'm just giving you a logical reason why they're not that anxious to do it. Last word.
Okay, well, the White House counsel could conduct an inquiry, look at all the classified documents, talk to General Flynn, and put it out, or have some reporters who are neutral in all of this into the White House and say, here are the documents, here's what people say, and put it out. Believe me, this is going to fester for weeks, if not months, if there aren't answers to very serious questions.
All right. Neutral reporters, though, where would we, do we have to go abroad to find them, or where would we find them? All right, Bob, always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you. Next on the rundown is all the Trump hatred now damaging the country beyond repair. Then later, Miller, Martha MacCallum, Lou Dobbs, Karl Rove, all upcoming. Impact segment tonight, President Trump reacting to the General Flynn situation in a joint news conference with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu.
From intelligence, papers are being leaked, things are being leaked. It's criminal action, criminal act, and it's been going on for a long time before me, but now it's really going on. And people are trying to cover up for a terrible loss that the Democrats had under Hillary Clinton. I think it's very, very unfair what's happened to General Flynn, the way he was treated.
And joining us now to react, Geraldo Rivera and Eric Bolling. So, Bolling, if President Trump thinks what happened to General Flynn is unfair, why did he accept his resignation?
I think he asked for his resignation, and he can also think what happened to General Flynn was unfair, and I do too. Look, I think General Flynn was asked to resign.
If you're the president and you feel a general who's a patriot, a distinguished man, who really served his country well, is treated unfair, then why do you boot him out?
He said treated unfairly by the press.
Yeah.
Of course you can be treated.
Why wouldn't you just stand behind him?
As he said, as Trump said, or as spokesman Spicer said, there was an eroding trust factor with General Flynn, and that was likely because of Vice President Pence. The press is taking apart General Flynn because of his conversations with Russia, which I don't think amount to a hill of beans.
Well, you don't know.
That New York Times article today was extensive. I read it 3 separate times. I found 3 different times they alluded to accusations of possible FBI involvement, but
the
they
New York
walked all
Times
3 of them
doesn't
back.
know, you don't know, Rivera doesn't know, and I don't know.
Yeah, but he's been excoriated in the press.
And we just did a segment on it.
Yeah,
we just did an entire segment
Those
on
two
that.
things aren't mutually exclusive.
Okay, but I don't know if he's being treated unfairly, and you were the president, Rivera, oh my God, would you have accepted?
I'd be in less of a jam than our friend President Trump is right now. I think a couple of things. I think, number one, to complain, if you did not complain about hacks and leaks when they were damaging to Hillary Clinton, you have no moral right to complain about the hacks and leaks that took down General Flynn, and there will be others. Secondly, you have a situation here. People have to get their arms around what this is. There are now between 4 and 9 internal sources saying that there were 4 people in the Trump campaign and then his transition team who were in, quote, repeated and constant communication with Russian intelligence, meaning the KGB.
But that doesn't matter.
To alter the election of the United States, it doesn't, Bill.
You don't know what that the only man
this
that's
goes to the very essence.
See, look, you're doing something un-American. You're convicting.
I resent that.
They have
I
the
deeply
presumption
resent that.
of innocence.
They definitely do.
And you're not giving it to them.
You heard from Bob Woodward. You heard from Thomas Friedman, and now you're hearing it.
You're
from
not giving. You're using anonymous sources with no factual
When you
backup.
have 9 sources.
Wait a minute. You're taking that from whom? From whom?
Where did they see the 9 sources? I said Washington Post, Bob Woodward's newspaper.
There are no names on them.
Now we need names, but for Hillary Clinton to destroy her candidacy, to destroy Hillary Clinton, you don't need names for Hillary Clinton's destruction.
Okay, look,
but now suddenly to
you're
show
not giving the presumption of innocence.
This is an extraordinary thing that just happened. That this was.
What's this? What is it?
You have a presidential campaign in communication with our arch enemy, the Russians.
Who in the campaign?
You called Putin a killer. You busted the president's chops and said, how can you be friends with a killer?
Because
Vladimir
we have
Putin.
the facts to back
so now
that up.
You have the Trump campaign having a conversation with Vladimir Putin.
Who in the Trump campaign?
As you sit there tonight,
who?
Do you believe that there was no communication between the Trump campaign? You now have the recording. Why was General Flynn fired?
Because he misled Pence.
Nothing.
Do you believe that?
Yes,
you believe that?
I think that's
so. What
why.
did he mislead Pence about?
I don't know.
He misled.
So therefore, I don't convict.
If he misled Vice President Pence, it was about his communications with Russia. Ergo, there were communications with Russia.
Pence was teed off. Go ahead.
100% right. He was asked for his resignation because he said to Pence, no, I didn't have any discussions with Russia. Not what the discussions were.
That's
about,
what we think happened.
Well, no. Pence said, I spoke to Flynn, and he didn't speak with the Russians. Subsequently, there have been 9 separate sources saying that they did, in fact, talk. So Pence was out on a limb. He put his vice president out on a limb. Flynn needed to be fired for that reason, not because of what we do or don't know the actual conversations with. For all we know, Geraldo, he could have picked up the phone
the most
saying,
recent
look,
stories,
I'm likely going to be the NSA director. I want to work with you.
All right, Bolin, you got to shut up now. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Directly ahead, Lou Dobbs. The stock market going crazy, but is that dangerous for you and the country? And later, awful story out of Baltimore. 18-year-old shot dead by police after being released from custody by a judge. Those reports after these messages. Personal story segment tonight. As we mentioned, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu met with President Trump today. As you may know, Israel and the USA were not on the same page under President Obama. But even more confusing is the political bent of American Jews. They make up 3% of the electorate and voted for Hillary Clinton over Donald Trump by a whopping 71 to 23. 2008, it was even worse. Barack Obama got 78%, John McCain 21%. And remember, Senator McCain is a fervent friend of Israel. Joining us now from Austin, Texas, Carl Rose. So it seems that liberal domestic ideology overwhelms security for Israel when American Jews go to the polls, or am I wrong?
Well, look, since the 1930s, since the onset of the New Deal, Jews have tended to vote Democratic, overwhelmingly so. Before that period of time, particularly after 1896, they voted overwhelmingly Republican. But that social justice impulse of Jews caused them, on the onset of the New Deal, to begin to vote Democratic. Now, they were comfortable doing that because for most of the last 80 years, Democratic nominees for president, with the exception perhaps of George McGovern, were reliably pro-Israel. You know, and the Democratic Party was the party of Scoop Jackson and John F. Kennedy and Hubert Humphrey, great supporters of the state of Israel. But that changed under President Obama, though it hasn't shaken the conviction of a lot of Democrats.
It was interesting because Netanyahu made it clear that he thought President Obama was not an enemy, but not a friend of Israel. He made that very clear. And Hillary Clinton vowed to pretty much, she was the Secretary of State, so she carried out that policy, yet 71% still voted for her. It's an interesting phenomenon. Okay, we have a new poll.
One more thing about that,
yes?
though. Just remember, I think Donald Trump is authentically pro-Israel, but also this issue is very important to evangelical Christians. And as a result, that's a big part of both his primary victory and his general election victory. And I know the leadership of the evangelical community discussed Israel with him and tried to make certain that he was solid on the issue right from the start.
Yeah, and Trump has been pretty consistent in saying that we're going to protect Israel. And the reason the evangelicals are interested is because the Holy Land is there. And the Christian sites are there, as well as the Muslim sites and the Jewish sites. All right, brand new Fox poll just handed to me on a Supreme Court nominee, Neil Gorsuch. Would you approve him? 42%, 49% would. No, 37. No opinion, 14. And then we have another question. The Democrats doing everything they can to block Mr. Gorsuch from becoming a Supreme Court justice. Do you approve of that? 42% approve, 54% don't. So that seems to say that the American people, and okay, there's another one. Supreme Court is a too liberal, 31, about right, 47, too conservative, 18. So Gorsuch looks like he's in pretty good shape. I think he'll be confirmed, but I'm not sure about the timeline on it.
Yeah. Well, look, the poll is good news for him. And what I thought was interesting was an even higher percentage of the electorate dislikes the Democrat approach. Don't ever vote on him, obstruct him, stop him from serving, then at this point support him. But, you know, you touched briefly on that last one. This is an indication of how, you know, unanchored a lot of public opinion is. If you look at that final question, which is, do you think Supreme Court decisions are too liberal, about right, or too conservative? The last time Fox News asked that question was in 2015. 45% back then said too liberal. Today, 31, about right, 34 2 years ago, 47% today. I think that's because a lot of people say, oh, there's a vacancy on the court. Trump has made a nomination. The guy seems pretty good. Therefore, the court is already in a better place. It's very odd, in my opinion.
Yeah,
because,
I mean, it's hard
as we know, the Supreme Court has been contentious the last year or two.
It's hard to calibrate that. It's also an issue that's not very well educated in the public eye. When you ask a question to Americans randomly, and it's a very sophisticated analysis you're asking here, the tendency of accuracy drops through the floor. It's not like, is Trump doing a good job? Everybody has an opinion. Supreme Court, it's a little murky. They don't really know what's going on.
Well, they have an opinion, but it's not well anchored. You're right. It isn't deep and well convicted, but it is an opinion. And it's interesting to see. I think they've already made a decision. This guy seems to be okay with me, and the court is going to be about right.
You know, I like it when you say you're right to me.
Yeah, but I was talking about the poll.
No. You said
I was talking mostly about the poll. Mostly about the poll.
Call Rove, everybody. Miller on deck. He says Americans are no longer able to get along. Miller is next.
O'Reilly Factor, the #1 cable news show for 16 years and counting.
Thanks for staying with us. I'm Bill O'Reilly in the Miller Time segment tonight. 2 weeks ago, the D-Man and I discussed his idea, putting a wall between California, Oregon, and Washington State and the rest of the West, dividing the folks. Also walls around the Northeast and Chicago because attitudes are so different in those places. Tonight, Miller would like to expand his theory. He joins us now from Florida. What are you doing in Florida? You hanging out with Mar-a-Lago down there, Miller? What are you doing?
Billy, I'm down here for the big Phil Keating hair seminar this weekend. We sit with Phil, and he talks about the latest cutting-edge pomades and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Then I go up the road. Next week, I'm at the Burt Reynolds Dinner Theater in Jupiter, Florida, doing love letters with Nancy Pelosi. And today I find out she can't read, so we have to teach her this. We have to teach her the script phonetically.
Phil Keating, by the way, a Fox News correspondent based in South Florida, for those of you who... All right, Miller, now, you're saying that Americans are no longer going to be able to
Bill,
get along.
Let me quote the great Buffalo Springfield. There's something happening here, and what it is all too clear. We're going through a divorce. This is like getting War of the Roses ugly. If you want to check the docket in the court, it's been filed as the deplorables versus the insufferables. And I think that we're basically incompatible right now. Some of the things the Democrats are doing are scaring the living hell out of me. Can I enumerate a couple of them?
Certainly.
Well, they've turned into Dr. Strangelove versus Russia. I mean, we've gone from this silly thing where Hillary's standing there with the Jeopardy button, you know, asking them to hit it, and now every day I wake up and they're completely hawkish, and I'm worried about them vaporizing Moscow like failsafe. And you know something, Billy, it gave me a good idea when I was watching Pelosi talk about this earlier this week. We should make Pelosi's face the decal on the front of our unmanned drones. Wouldn't that scare the living hell out of you? Coming down the pipe, and just that look. Now, Schumer has turned into Donald Segretti. You're a history buff from the Nixon days.
Right.
And he's into the dirty trick squad right now. And he'll do anything to screw this president up. I watch the news every night. They say there's peaceful protests. Then I watch kids throwing sawhorses through the windows of banks, and I think, this is what's passing for peaceful right now? The only good thing about those protests, I can tell you, Bill, is for the first time, a lot of those kids have a steady job. It's nice to see them out working that hard, because heretofore they've been home on the couch. Now, you're a history buff, like I said earlier, and I have to ask you a question, Bill. I mean this in all seriousness. Obviously, we came to a primal fork in the road in the 1850s, 1860s over slavery. In the country, it could not abide anybody believing in slavery. We had to break up. But up to that moment, I sometimes read stories about Grant and Lee and all these West Point guys being friends. Do you think, outside of the fact that a house divided had to be because we had to eradicate slavery, do you think the country was this polarized as far as manners with each other, or was it better than prior to the Civil War?
No, the hatred after the Civil War was pretty intense, and leading up to it, people were being whipped up, and you know, when you're stabbing each other to death with bayonets, I mean, that's a pretty extreme situation.
No, but I mean, before the Civil War, what was the headset of the country? Like this?
No, because everybody was, what's happening now, the difference now is, back then you had to make a living or you died. All right, there was no like welfare. Yes. All right, so you're out in the fields or you were doing what you did 10, 12 hours a day. And so you didn't really have time to come back and watch cable. And it wasn't cable. But now there is cable. But even worse is there are little machines that just whip stuff up like crazy and get to people emotionally. And so they're walking around taking their frustrations out on people they don't agree with politically. It's all take the frustrations out on.
You would concur, though, it's as rough as you've seen it right now.
It is.
I don't think you were around in the Civil War.
I've never seen America more hateful. Even it's worse than the Vietnam era. It's worse. Last word.
Yeah. I knew our leaders were in Washington. I just didn't realize it was the state. That's how split we are. We can't even decide if we're going to have a border anymore. I heard when I was coming in here today that the 7 countries on the President's Day, the 7 countries have sued us. Today, they issued a statement in the Ninth Circuit Court. The 7 countries said, listen, we've got all our crazy terrorists in. We need you to shut it down now. You're diluting the work pool. When our guys go to sign crazies up, they're going to run into bad crazies. We need you. And Mike Flynn, by the way, just signed to be Hillary's new webmaster on her new website. So there you go. It all comes full circle.
There he is, Dennis Miller. All right,
and
Martha McCallum.
The switchboard operator. Blah, 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 blah.
I have to go to Martha, and she's on deck. An awful story out of Baltimore. 18-year-old shot dead by police after a judge put him out on the street where she should not have done that. Martha, moments away. Back in the book segment tonight, did you see that? In Baltimore, an 18-year-old named Curtis Deal, arrested 3 times since the first of the year on drug and weapons charges. Nevertheless, Judge Nicole Taylor allowed Mr. Deal to avoid jail, even though the prosecution told her he was dangerous. 1 day later, Deal shot dead by police.
Dramatic video caught by a body camera worn by a Baltimore City police officer. Still pictures show the suspect emerges from an alley with the gun in his hand, his finger on the trigger. He points it at the officer. A loaded 9mm handgun, police say. Then the decision. Seemingly within only 3 seconds, Officer Kincaid fires his weapon, shot Deal 3 times, killing him.
Here now to explain further, Fox News anchor Martha McCallum. He's here at 7 p.m. right before the factor. So this is a heroin dealer, this kid?
Heroin dealer, large-scale drug deals. He had been arrested, as you said, 3 times since January of 2017, in just the past few months. So they brought him in on that 3rd charge, and she let him go. This Judge Nicole Miller, she said essentially that she believed, Nicole Taylor, excuse me, she said that she wanted him to go back to school. She said that she felt he was a basketball player. He wanted to join the Army. The safest thing for this young man and for the community around him was for him to stay in that jail. He'd be alive today if she had put him in jail, most likely, and an officer could very easily have been killed in this moment. I mean, he turns and points that gun back, and when you get the screenshot, it is very clear.
We want to make it clear there's been no demonstrations or anything that's criticizing the police here. It's pretty clear that the body cam on the officer shows what happened. But here's the deal. If you are a judge, sitting criminal judge, and you have a guy come in 3 times in 30 days, all right, on guns and heroin charges, and you let him go the 3rd time, you should not be sitting on any bench anywhere. This is happening all over the country.
And she's a former public defender, and she clearly had sympathy
and public
for him.
defenders defend poor people.
But I think your point is exactly right. He was also safer if she had put him in jail.
Right.
I mean, he needed to be in jail, this young man, and now he is dead. And a police officer could have very easily lost his life that night as well.
As a point made, but it's so outrageous that we are living in a time. Everybody's screaming about gun control. I mean, this guy had a gun, and she lets him out. If you have a gun, you shouldn't be out anywhere. Okay. Now, there was an ad that caught our eye, made by a veterans organization, an anti-Trump ad. Go.
President Trump, I hear you watch the morning shows. Here's what I do every morning. Look, you lost the popular vote. You're having trouble drawing a crowd, and your approval rating keeps sinking. But kicking thousands of my fellow veterans off their health insurance by killing the Affordable Care Act and banning Muslims won't help. That's not the America I sacrificed for. You want to be a legitimate president, sir? Then act like one.
Okay, so that's put out by a far-left organization.
VoteVets.org, it's called.
Yeah, nobody knows what that is. They just see a guy who lost his leg in the service of his country complaining about the president. So what's the background of this organization?
So it's a progressive group that supports veterans. They've also done a lot for gay rights issues, labor issues. In this instance, it's a pretty powerful ad, and they placed it on SNL. They placed it on Morning Joe. They placed it in places that they feel President Trump is watching to make their point, and they're talking out against what they see as cutting benefits, health care benefits. If Obamacare goes, they believe that certain
purely political play.
No, I mean, they're clear. The guy who runs it
that exploits
very much against Donald Trump and has spoken out against him many times.
Because you could get just as many wounded veterans to say good things.
And we've seen that throughout the course of the campaign.
It's America, and you can do it, but I don't think it's very dignified to do. Now, we told the audience we're going to find out who is behind this grab your wallet deal that has organized the Nordstrom's attacks and get the Trump products out. So tell us who's doing this.
So her name is Shannon Coulter. She's 45 years old. She's a marketing executive in San Francisco. And this is what she does all day. She's given over all of her client business for someone else to take care of because she is so obsessed with the grab your wallet movement. So the screen that you just saw is a list of companies who not only sell Trump products, but who have any affiliation with Trump products. Even Amazon is on that list because there are Trump products that you can find on Amazon.
Sure.
And she's encouraging people to boycott.
So this is a San Francisco woman who is a successful business person who now runs this grab your wallet.
Whole life now.
And she wants to intimidate companies that sell any Trump products. That's what she does full time. Again, perfect right to do it. Is it really nice to do? Is that the American way? I don't think so.
Here's the other thing. It's probably not effective. I mean, there's no indication that these products... Nordstrom's booted Ivanka, but there's no, because it's not a public company, you can't really see the bottom line that clearly.
Right.
But studies show that the Trump brand went up about 35% after he was elected. Business Insider did a study and looked at that.
Yeah, but they're afraid.
I also think people burn out on these things. I mean, they like to buy the stuff they like to buy, and they tend to go back to it after a momentary boycott, but we'll see.
Martha McCallum, everybody. Fact and tip of the day. Do you drink too much water? The tip, moments away. Fact and tip of the day, drinking water mania. In a moment, but first the mail. Ryan Harris, San Jose, Costa Rica. Mark Cuban was good at telling us how nothing will work under President Trump. Perhaps he can then tell us how President Obama's great policies led to Trump in the White House. Little irony from Costa Rica there. Tom Gibson, Wabasha, Minnesota. Hey, Bill, why have a successful guy like Mark Cuban on? If you're not going to let him elaborate on his points, you might have learned something. It's a debate program, Tom. Both sides did speak. Peter Gilman, Melbourne, Australia. O'Reilly, you and the Fox News team are enraged at the media attacks on Donald Trump. Have you forgotten how you smeared President Obama for 8 years? Impossible to forget because it didn't happen, Peter. Not here. We reported accurately on the Obama administration. Period. Grant Maxwell, British Columbia, Canada. Mr. O, while your analysis of General Flynn was fair, it ignored the elephant in the room. It's not speculation to state that Russia was going to burn Trump. Of course it's speculation, Grant. The elephant even knows that. When facts emerge about Russia and what they did or did not do, we'll report and assess them. Diane Jocelyn, Augusta, Maine. O'Reilly, your talking points, Mr. Mark. The real story is the Obama people breaking laws. Please forward the facts on that, Diane. We'll be happy to discuss them. Thomas Straka, Pendleton, South Carolina. O'Reilly, your tip of the day was unkind to zombies. Saying they don't work is untrue. The federal agencies are full of them. Skander Helm, Los Angeles. O'Reilly, that was a clever piece of satire on The Walking Dead. Your own program is an endless parade of zombies marching in lockstep to Republican talking points. Sure it is. Beth Garvey, Destin, Florida. Bill loved your take on The Walking Dead. Thank you for the levity. Well, you're welcome, Beth. William Gibson, Denver, Pennsylvania. As I listened to the young Yale student talk about the worthiness of the Black Panthers, I became sad. Yale and other Ivy League schools used to represent the best of America. Now they have become propaganda centers. Ron Unger, Newscastle, Washington. Bill, I learned so much. Reading Killing the Rising Sun, people need to know just how much the world suffered and will suffer again when evil nations become too powerful. Well said, Ron. Very happy birthday to Elsie Manley in West Virginia, 100 years old. Finally tonight, factor tip of the day, drinking bottled water. For some, it's an obsession. True story. I'm at Mass on Sunday. A woman comes in carrying a giant bottle of water. Not holy water, Poland Spring or something. Puts it right on the pew. So this lady cannot go 45 minutes without slugging down. Drinking water is a good thing. Carrying water wherever you go is dopey. Unless you're auditioning for Lawrence of Arabia, you don't need constant watering. However, whoever thought that hydrating thing up is a marketing genius. Now here's the tip. Drink when you're thirsty. And water is the best quencher. But ease up on carrying the bottle around. And that is it for us tonight. Please check out the Fox News Factor website, which is different from BillO'Reilly.com. Also, I'd like you to spout off about the factor from anywhere in the world. O'Reilly at FoxNews.com. O'Reilly at FoxNews.com. Name and town if you wish to opine. Word of the day, do not be Saturnine. And right into the factor. Now, tomorrow, we're taking a look at the TV ratings in late night and morning compared to 5 years ago. It's amazing what's happening in this country, that a lot of people are not watching late night or morning TV anymore. I want to find out why. Dragging in Bernie Goldberg. It'll be an interesting segment. Again, thanks for watching us tonight. I'm Bill O'Reilly. Please always remember that the spin stops here. Yes, we are definitely looking out for you. Tonight,
people are trying to cover up for a terrible loss that the Democrats had under Hillary Clinton. I think it's very, very unfair what's happened to General Flynn.
President Trump saying General Flynn's demise was partially the fault of the press. But is that true? Talking points. We'll deal with it.
That was a 9/11 scale event. They attacked the core of our very democracy. That was a Pearl Harbor scale event.
A New York Times columnist says Russia committed an act of war toward the USA. Bowling and Rivera on that.
And when someone points a gun at a cop, that's something that we take very, very seriously. They were out there doing what we asked them to do, going after bad guys with guns.
Also ahead, a gun-wielding 18-year-old shot dead by police after being released from custody by a judge. A shocking situation. Caution. You are about to enter the no spin zone. The factor begins right now. Hi, I'm Bill O'Reilly. Thanks for watching us tonight. Mass hysteria over General Michael Flynn. That is the subject of this evening's Talking Points memo. As we reported last night, the National Security Advisor has resigned because the Trump administration says it lost confidence in him. The story's a bit complicated, but it boils down to this. Flynn had phone contact with the Russian ambassador in late December while Barack Obama was still president. According to leaks from the intelligence agencies, Flynn discussed Mr. Obama's sanctions against Russia. Then General Flynn denied that to Vice President Mike Pence. The FBI also interviewed General Flynn, and if he lied to them, that would be a crime. However, that's a big if. It is not a crime for Mr. Flynn to informally talk with the Russian ambassador before Donald Trump took office, but it's highly inappropriate if policy was discussed. So at this point, Flynn's out, and it looks like retired Vice Admiral Robert Harwood will take his place. Admiral Harwood is 60 years old, has extensive military experience, served in Afghanistan. Looks like a solid choice, but you never know. By the way, the FBI is still investigating the whole Russian situation, but that's all we know at this point. However, lack of facts doesn't stop the anti-Trump press from whipping up hysteria. There are two things in play. First, the Trump haters are fervently hoping they can link the Trump campaign to the Russian hackers who disrupted the Clinton campaign. That's the ultimate goal for the haters. If they cannot achieve that, they'd like to have General Flynn tell the world that Donald Trump ordered him to call the Russian ambassador. So that's the media game plan. Now, yesterday, the bombast on our cable competition was actually humorous. New York Times columnist Thomas Friedman compared the Russian hacking to war.
We have never taken seriously from the very beginning, Russia hacked our election. That was a 9/11 scale event. They attacked the core of our very democracy. That was a Pearl Harbor scale event.
Now, here's how crazy that statement is. Say President Trump declared war on Russia, as we did after Pearl Harbor. Would Thomas Friedman support that? Of course not. So this is just madness. However, the anti-Trump media loves this kind of stuff. Let me give you another very simple example, and it has to do with speculation.
Do you think Flynn acted alone when he made that phone call to the Russian ambassador in Washington?
I don't think that anything in Washington happens alone.
Now, that man, Congressman Seth Moulton, is a Trump hater. Also, he has no blanking idea whether General Flynn acted alone. He couldn't possibly know. Wolf Blitzer, generally a responsible guy, asked a speculative question based on nothing. There could not have been any credible answer that shed light on the Flynn situation. So why bother with that nutty speculation? The answer is there are millions of Trump haters who will sit there in front of the TV hour after hour after hour and watch this kind of bilge, B-I-L-G-E, bilge. And that's why they do it. Summing up, there's no credible evidence at this point that the Trump campaign cooperated with the Russians in the hacking of the Clinton campaign. None. There is no credible evidence that General Flynn was directed to do anything. Yet the anti-Trump media spends hours talking trash. One footnote, hard news reporters should be looking into all the Russian intrusions, including the Flynn situation. And if those reporters uncover evidence of wrongdoing, it should be presented. But speculation by the media is garbage. And that's the memo. Now for the top story reaction, joining us from Washington, legendary investigative reporter Bob Woodward, an associate editor of the Washington Post. Where am I going wrong here, Mr. Woodward?
Well, there is an anti-Trump press. There's a pro-Trump press. I think the hard news reporters, as you said, should keep digging on this. Here's my reaction. I know General Flynn a little bit, and the idea that he kind of misled about one thing, as you know, Bill, people in the White House always mislead somebody on something. That became a firing offense does not make sense to me. And all my alarm bells went off. Why is he gone for this? And I think the alarm bells went off for lots of reporters.
All right, let me give you the explanation that's coming out of the White House is that Vice President Pence, very powerful guy, talked to Flynn, and Flynn told him, hey, I didn't talk about any of the sanctions. And then the Vice President went on network television and said that hey, General Flynn didn't do it. And now, turns out, because of tapped conversations and, you know, transcripts that nobody's seen, but nobody's denying it anymore, that Flynn did talk about sanctions. So when you, at that level, mislead a vice president and goes out and then, you know, misstates something, that is a firing offense, Bob, and you know it.
Well, not necessarily.
Oh, come
Look,
on.
He apologized. Now you come on. And so I'm telling you, my alarm bells went off. I think lots of people had the same feeling who were in the media, so they're asking the question, what really goes on here?
Dopey speculative questions to Trump haters are quite something.